Real pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm not going to share anything around recruitment or talent acquisition because that's not my bag. I'm going to share with you what I know, which is obviously being a Paralympic swimmer, a broadcaster, and more recently an inclusion consultant with the Ability People. So you might have already met some of our team earlier today on the stand. I'm also going to fill you in that this isn't a story about gold medals because I don't have any to show you, because I'm not a Paralympian that has won a gold medal. And I hope that does still mean I can inspire you. And I guess I'll spend the next 20 minutes trying to persuade you that inspiration and success can still come whether there's glory at the end in a form of a gold medal or not. So hopefully I'll take you on that journey with me. I'll be completely honest as well. I think one thing I really pride myself with as someone with a disability is that we've got to be honest, we've got to help people feel comfortable, and we need to kind of bring them into our circle and make them think that actually it's okay to be ourselves, it's okay to embrace our differences, and actually if I do that, then maybe I might end up being a better version of myself. So hopefully you might leave feeling like that as well. But as I said, I like to be honest, and when I was about 13, 14 years old, I was that standard teenager at school, but I had a couple of goals that I wanted to achieve. I've always been quite a goal-setting kind of person. I guess it's the athlete in me. And I set myself two goals. One was to become a PE teacher because I was that sporty kid at school. Loved the idea of being in joggers all day, and thank God we get to wear trainers now. It's totally acceptable. So I always wanted to be a PE teacher, and I always wanted to go on to be a Paralympic medalist. And as I stand here today, I haven't actually achieved either of those goals. And you're probably wondering, why have they brought her in to inspire? Why have they brought her in to sparkle that moment at the end to hopefully leave here feeling like, well, what is success then if it's not a gold medal or if it's not reaching our goals? And because I was an athlete for so many years, that's exactly what I thought. I thought I set a goal and I achieve a goal, I'm successful. And if I don't, then I'm a failure. And for a long time, I did have that mindset of, well, I must be a failure then because I haven't achieved my goals. But through the journey that I've been on since my swimming journey and sort of falling into the world of work and inclusion, I've looked back at my career and my experiences in life, and I've realised that success has come in many different forms, and that we shouldn't get hung up on that end goal or that gold medal, and that we should try and search for that success in everything that we do and constantly keep reflecting on ourselves. So hopefully the next few minutes will make you see and help you understand that as well. Now, I'm actually probably going to be the only person that now decides to share a picture of themselves in a bikini at 2 years old. I don't think anybody else has done that today, no? Again, I like to be honest, I like to be a little bit different. And the main reason why I'm showing you this picture is because my story pretty much started from the beginning when it comes to my journey of disability, because this is actually one of the few pictures that I have with two hands. So actually for me, it's living proof that once upon a time, I did have two hands. And I do a lot of work with young people and young leaders, and I would usually throw the question out now to the room to say, who wants to take a guess at how I lost my left hand? And this picture very nicely tees up some obvious answers. Anyone brave enough to maybe predict what the guesses of the young people might be? Perfect, thank you. Shark attack is usually what follows. And I'm sorry to say it's not a shark attack. It would have been a pretty cool story. It would stick in the mind, wouldn't it? Athlete once lost her arm in a shark attack and now she's a Paralympic swimmer. But it wasn't too dissimilar with regards to the dramatics of it, because actually I lost my left hand in a sausage machine when I was 2 years old, just a few weeks after this photo was taken. And you're probably wondering, what on earth was a 2-year-old doing with a sausage machine? And I'm scuffing my microphone a little bit, aren't I? And just to give it a little bit of background, I grew up on a farm. I was one of those terrible 2-year-olds that when your parents say, don't mess with that, you'll hurt yourself, I go and do it anyway. And as a result, I put my left hand into a working machine and my life changed forever on that day. For my parents, it was the worst day of their life. They saw it all unfold and they couldn't stop it. And back 33 years ago, just to give away my age, the prospects for disabled people weren't bright. There was no Paralympics on our TVs. There were no role models out there for disabled people. And growing up in a farming family where your physical ability was your greatest asset, they feared for what the future held for me. And understandably. For me, though, I look back on that day and I genuinely believed it changed my life for the better, because it forced me to face challenges a lot sooner in life than the average person. I've had to constantly adapt on a day-to-day basis. I have faced adversity on a daily basis, told I can't do things, told I'm not right for that, I don't fit the brief. And I guess it's taught me to be resilient. Because actually, with all the negativity that comes on the journey of growing up with a disability, you have to keep bouncing back. You have to be resilient. So I'm actually quite grateful for the life experience that I've had, because I feel it's best equipped me for the person that I am today and for the challenges that might unfold. The only real memory I have from that day was actually waking up. And is it me or is it this way?
Can you stand at the length?
Oh, yeah, I can. That's no worries. I'm a fidget, so I'll do my best. So the only real memory I have from that day was actually waking up and realising that I no longer had a left thumb. And I used to suck my left thumb. That was my comfort, and it was gone. And I suddenly thought, well, what am I going to do now? I looked at my mum. She was obviously traumatised by the whole experience and wasn't quite ready to help me out with that one. Very quickly, I found my right thumb. I put that in my mouth and I was sorted. And already at 2 years old, I was proving to my parents that I was going to be absolutely fine, and having that mindset and attitude of, well, I'll just give it a go. I'll just see what happens. And it's probably the best time to gain an injury or a disability, because I don't have any memory of what life was like before. So actually, growing up, I almost thrived in the challenge. I guess the main challenge that I faced at a young age, another embarrassing photo for you, was starting school. Because up until that point in my life, I'd never been exposed to any other disabilities. I don't blame my parents for that, and it was no fault of their own, but actually they didn't want to put me in a box. They didn't want me to go, well, she's disabled, so she can only spend time with disabled people, and we can only go to disabled clubs. Plus, there wasn't that many people out there to meet, so I'd never met anybody else like myself. And I thought when I started school, I might meet someone like me. Maybe there might be another person out there with one hand. But I went to a mainstream primary school, and I was the only one there with a physical disability. And I got looked at, I got laughed at, I got, oh, what's wrong with her? Oh, that's disgusting. Because that was the attitude to disability. Young people weren't exposed to it, so they didn't know how to react to it. And I had a decision to make at that young age of whether I hide at the back, I feel embarrassed, I don't want to talk about it, or I embrace the fact that I was different. I help other people understand that there's nothing wrong with me, and I educate them on the fact that actually difference is okay. And luckily, through the experience I'd had until that point, I chose the latter. I used to take my prosthetic hand off and pass it around the room so everybody could have a go. It wound the teachers up because they were like, what on earth is this arm doing now? It just pops up at any moment. But I created that feeling of comfort, of understanding, and of just people realising there's nothing wrong with her. She's just different, and that's okay. And young people are very accepting, if we're just honest with them. And so actually, very quickly, it was no longer an issue. Very quickly, we got over it. It was actually the teachers that were the biggest challenge for me. Because when it came to PE, which was going to be my favourite subject, that's the one I really wanted to do, I was told to sit out. Because I can't catch, I can't skip, I can't climb. They assumed I couldn't do all these things. And actually, again, no fault of their own, the way people reacted or acted around disabled people was that, well, it's best they don't fail. It's best they don't embarrass themselves. We'll just let them sit out. And many young people will have had that same experience who've had a disability, because that was just the norm. Whereas for me, that was my time. I was no good at sitting down doing numbers and letters, but sport was where I wanted to really go for it. So I had to sit in the corner and throw the ball up against the wall hundreds of times until I taught myself how to catch. I tied a skipping rope around my arm till it went blue just so I could take part in the skipping race. But through all these little moments, I was showing everybody around me that you should never assume someone's abilities. You should never prejudge someone's abilities. And I was lucky in the fact that I did have a mindset and attitude of, well, I'm going to give it a go. Because a lot of people's experience has been, well, if they tell me I can't do it, I don't have the energy to keep fighting. But I did keep fighting, I did keep proving them wrong, and I realised I was actually not only educating them, but I was exposing them to what was possible. I focused on capabilities, not disabilities. And by doing that, everybody started to go, God, we've got to stop writing this girl off. And for me, I thrived in an environment of proving people wrong. And that's something I've always enjoyed in life, is that, okay, you say I can't do that, I'm going to go above and beyond to prove you wrong. So actually, once we got over those early phases of school, it was a real positive experience for me. But I realised I was constantly having to lead people on the journey with me. I was constantly having to educate them and expose them to my experience and ensure that they don't then imprint that negativity on anybody else. And hopefully it's left a lasting impact. And sport was a huge part of that. Sport was my thing. I honestly believe we've all got a passion out there that gives us confidence and self-belief. Sport was mine. And it got me through my school years. So I went on to secondary school and I was captain of the netball team. I was in every running race possible. I definitely wasn't the best, but I was the one that was willing to lead. I was the one that was willing to bring that energy to the room. So for me, it's always been a positive strand of my life sport. There's actually one sport, though, that I hated. Anybody want to take a guess which sport that might have been? Not hockey. I've knocked someone's front teeth out playing hockey, but blame the prosthetic. No, it might be more obvious than you think. Swimming, yes. So, Paralympic swimmer, hated swimming in the early years because I was that kid that got dragged to the pool, I got dumped in, pretty much drowned, and if I wasn't drowning, I was swimming around in circles because I was like a rowing boat with one paddle. And unlike all the other experiences I've had in sport, I could teach myself. I could take myself away, I could fail, I could try again, have another go. But swimming, if I did that, I drowned and wouldn't come back up. So that wasn't going to be something I could keep doing. So I had to ask for help, and I wasn't very good at that because I was constantly having to prove people that anything was possible and that disabled people could do anything. And then I realised actually on this occasion it was okay to ask for help. And I ended up having to have one-to-one lessons, which again was something I struggled to come to terms with, but it was probably the best experience for me in terms of realising that it's not always about fighting to be the best and fighting to be the fastest, the strongest. Sometimes it's just about being the best version of yourself. And over a 5-year process, I did learn to swim. I can say it saved me from many incidents because I think that was what my parents mainly wanted me to swim because I was accident prone, as my life story has already proved. They needed me to learn to swim. And it's about the age of 10 that I was invited to my first swimming competition for disabled people. And not really sure what to expect. As I said, I wasn't a massive fan of swimming, but I thought, why not? And this was the first experience I was exposed to other people with disability. And in swimming, you can't hide. If you've ever watched the Paralympics or any form of disability sport, there's arms and legs everywhere. There's limbs that don't belong to people's bodies, and it's just all part of the experience. And I walked out on poolside and I thought, wow, this is something different. But again, it was my further exposure to other disabilities, and again, further developed my empathy for what is out there and what is possible. And, and I've got a very mild disability. I can live a fairly normal life. Unless they decide to put monkey bars in the place of steps, I can pretty much do everything like anybody else. But I appreciated that actually there's so much diversity out there. And swimming was a really safe place because actually it's one of the few sports where you can get in and have a go regardless of your disability, assuming you were supported in the right way. And at that competition, I actually came away with my first ever medal in swimming. It was a bronze medal, not even the best colour, obviously, but it was a medal that made me realise I was quite good at swimming. But that wasn't the reason why I kept swimming, because actually I loved all my other sports. I wanted to focus on them as well. But it was actually the people that I met there, the experiences that I had in the changing room, watching someone else with one hand put their hair up and tie their shoelaces. And it was a feeling of belonging, of like, actually, these people are like me. They make me feel safe, and I want to spend more time with them. And I feel that's something we can relate to the workplace. A feeling of belonging is a feeling. It's a cultural change where you go, do you know what? I feel accepted. I feel safe here. I feel like I can be myself. And it was probably one of the first occasions where I felt like I could be my true, authentic self, where I could ask questions and not feel judged, and I could learn from others, knowing that actually no one was going to laugh at me. And that's why I kept swimming. And actually, I think now I look back, I go, actually, that's how we would love every workplace to be, where people feel like they belong, and they're not being judged, and they can be their true, authentic self regardless of their abilities or disabilities. So I kept swimming, and that turned into a couple of times a week, 3 times a week, and then by the time I was about 13 years old, I was training every day, before and after school if I could fit it in. And I was competing at national competitions, winning medals at national competitions, and realising actually there was something out there for people with disability in the world of Paralympic sport. It wasn't on our TVs though. So I still wasn't quite sure what the end goal was, but I was part of this team now, and I was really excited about that. And at that point, I received a little letter through the post, and I was told that I had potential to be a Paralympic swimmer, and that I was now a part of the British swimming programme. And for the next 10 years, I had the most amazing experience competing for Great Britain all over the world at an age where actually my life was no longer about my disability, but my capabilities, because that's what I loved when I moved into the world of Paralympic sport and disability sport, is actually the disability wasn't important anymore. I was an elite athlete, and that's what I was being acknowledged for and what I was being appreciated for. Please also appreciate the retro tracksuit, isn't it fabulous? And it was also around the time that I became part of the British Wing programme that we had a huge announcement in British sport. And that was that London was going to host the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2012. And suddenly my whole life became focused on that end goal. And every decision I made, whether it was sort of the university I wanted to go to, the place I wanted to train, the parties that I missed, all became about getting to London 2012. And very often I was having to lead people down that journey with me because they didn't know what the Paralympics was. My swimming coach was like, why do you want to go to what is the Paralympics? What's it all about? And I was constantly having to help them get on board with my goal and my dream. But I was always a communicator. I was always someone who was like, I need your help. I'm going to have to help you. We're going to have to get to this point together, whether it was my studies, whether it was my sport, whether it was my life and my social life. So I was constantly trying to get people on board with me. But that then made it that little bit easier to get to those challenging phases. And I managed to get to the University of Bath, and it wasn't one of these scholarships where, oh, she's an athlete, she can come in, because again, I was turned away for being a Paralympic or a disabled athlete. It wasn't recognised. So I had to prove myself once again. I had to go on a trial period to check that I could fit in and they didn't have to have any special measures for me, which is, again, something that a lot of people face in the world of work. Well, what special measures do we need to put on for you? What extra cost is there going to be to have you part of our team? It didn't matter that I'd won medals at World Championships. It wasn't acknowledged because it hadn't been identified at that point. And I think what won them over wasn't my physical ability. I was never going to be as fast as my Olympic peers. But what I had was that mental attitude of like, I'll turn up and I'll give my best every training session. And I had the attitude of can-do attitude, and I will be the best that I can be on that day. And I think that's what people respected, and I think that's what's got me a long way in life. And within 6 months of being at the University of Bath, despite all the sort of change in life that I went through, coach, home, not eating Domino's every night, I managed to qualify for the Beijing Paralympics, which for me was a bit unexpected. You know, I'd always thought London was my goal. That was the one I was aiming for. The trajectory I was on, Beijing was going to be a bonus. But I qualified. And I turned up to my first Paralympics a bit of an underdog. No one really expected too much of me. It was a nice position to be in. And I remember walking out to my first race. I was in the outside lane, which means you're one of the slowest. And there was 15,000 people watching me, most of them Chinese. I'm not sure if they were paid to be there. It didn't matter. Because for me, I suddenly thought, oh my God, I've made it. All those hours of training up and down, it's not a glamorous sport for me. But finally being at the Paralympics, people were starting to acknowledge that this was something worth watching. And I dived in for my race, I did my thing, it was the 100 metres breaststroke. I touched the wall, looked up at the scoreboard, and all I could see was my face on the scoreboard. I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Why is my face up there? The time flashed up, and it turns out I'd won my heat. I'd done a 4-second personal best, and I qualified into my first ever Paralympic final in second position. Now, I don't often underestimate myself, but on this occasion, I was a little bit shocked. I got out the pool, Claire Balding was shocked, because she didn't even know who I was. We were in the mix, and she was like, what's your name? She hadn't done a research on me because I just wasn't someone to be known at that point. And I walked down, all the local radios wanted to talk to me, and I had this like, this is what it's all about. My parents were there, never been out of the UK, and there they are in China supporting their daughter. And it was a real like, oh my gosh, I've made it. But then the realization of what I was hoping to achieve kicked in. Of like, could I go on and win a medal? Am I good enough to be here? This whole like imposter syndrome kicked in. And then the next few hours between the heats and finals, I started to question, you know, eating the right things, drinking, resting, and really overthinking the whole process. And when I came out for the final, I was no longer that sort of like carefree individual anymore. I felt a huge amount of pressure on my shoulders. I dived in for my race, felt like I was swimming in treacle, to be honest with you. Looked up at the scoreboard, and my face wasn't up there this time. I wasn't first, second, third, or fourth, actually, which is the worst position, but actually I was fifth. And then I looked at the time, and I saw actually I'd gone half a second slower than I had done in the morning. And half a second was the difference between the silver medal and fifth place. That's how close it was. And all I had to do was repeat my swim, but because some simple things I didn't quite get right, I missed my opportunity. So I left Beijing feeling quite bittersweet, knowing actually I'd done so much better than I ever imagined, but actually I was so close to achieving something, you know, that I'd always dreamt of a lot sooner than I ever anticipated. So my goal became about training my mind as well as my body. I'd realized I'd trained my body, I was physically able to win a medal, but mentally I wasn't quite ready for that. And that's because as disabled athletes, Paralympic athletes, we weren't used to that environment. Usually it's my mum and dad and someone else's mum and dad watching us swim, not 15,000 people. So that was a bit of a lesson for me. And I spent the next 4 years building up to London, not only building up my, obviously, physical ability to go there, but also my mental ability as well. And I think that's something we've always got to think about from a personal point of view, is that we can do all the studying, all the research, all the background information we need to do something really well, but have we trained our brain as well? Have we got ourselves in a mindset that can go out there and be the best version of themselves? And within a year of Beijing, I went to the World Championships and won a silver and bronze medal out there. I graduated from university in 2010, and in 2011, I managed to break the world record in all of my events and went to #1 in the world in my category. So pretty much on that pathway to London as one of the favourites, and that's exactly what I was. I was a favourite to go to London 2012 and have that moment of glory. Unfortunately, off the back of that competition, I started getting coughs and colds, tonsillitis, sinusitis, all pretty standard things, but nothing was getting better. My training was deteriorating. I was losing weight and actually not able to train to any capacity, and to a point where I actually collapsed in the middle of the training, got taken to hospital, had a few tests done on me, and it turned out I had a very severe form of glandular fever verging on chronic fatigue. And the doctor said to me, Kate, it's not serious, but you're just going to have to take a rest. Yeah, there's no cure for chronic fatigue. You just have to take a break. This was just a few months before the trials for London 2012. And I just thought it was one of those situations where they go, you can't do it, and I'm going to prove them wrong. I just hoped it was going to be that fairy tale. But that wasn't the case. I did go to London 2012 trials, and I missed out on qualifying by half a second, which, you click your fingers. Just let me go. It's only half a second. But in the space of a year, I'd gone from being #1 in the world record holder to not even being able to qualify. So my health was deteriorating. And actually, if I'd continued on that trajectory, I would have probably became very, very unwell. So at that point, that wasn't important. In my eyes, all it was is that I was a failure. I'd spent the last 10 years of my life building up to that moment, and it was taken away from me in a second. And I had to really assess what was going to happen next. And that was that moment I spoke about at the beginning, where that feeling of failing, feeling of like not achieving my goals and what next. But then I was forced to reflect on my story when I realised I still had my other goal of becoming a teacher on the back burner. I'd missed the opportunity to get into a teaching degree that year. But I went down the route of mentoring through charities. So the Youth Sport Trust was a charity that I worked with. And I started having to tell my story. And I thought, who's going to want to hear my story? I didn't make it. How is that going to be inspirational? But again, what I've learned, and actually from your point of view as well, is that actually sometimes people just want someone who's relatable. And when I told my story about success and failure and ups and downs and not reaching the goal, but still trying to find something positive from it, their reaction was really positive. And it made me, well, it was a healing process for me. It made me realise that actually what I have achieved is something I should be very proud of, and that maybe this isn't something I should shy away from. So I continue working for them as a mentor, and I love working with young people. I think it's such an important sort of team of people to work with because they are the next generation. But around that time of London 2012, I also got invited by the BBC, completely randomly, to go and work for them as a commentator. They obviously found out I was quite good at chatting. Not sure where they got that from. And so I did get to go to London 2012. I commentated on many of the swimming races, cried on national radio, and had the best time watching people's perceptions towards disability change. But I want to correct that in the fact that actually it was people's perceptions toward disabled athletes and Paralympians change. I think we got hooked up in the world of London 2012 saying, this is it. People with disabilities, they're going to be looked at in a completely different way. Well, actually, athletes were looked at in a different way. And if you speak to most people with disability, their lives haven't changed that much since London 2012. But for me, in that moment in time, I was like, this is it. Wow, I've got every opportunity in front of me. Off the back of London 2012, I got trained up by the BBC to go on and be a journalist, and spent the next 10 years working across multiple sports, Paralympics, Winter Games, London Marathon, horse racing, anything I could get my teeth into, I was doing. But I think at the same time, I became very aware of the experiences of other people around me. And just recently, I've become a mother, so I've got 2 children, so I've had to take a step back from my career and once again reflect. I seem to do it in 10 years. And that's how I've become involved in the Ability People. And the Ability People is an organisation that you might have come across outside. It was actually set up by one of my co-Paralympians, Elizabeth Johnson. And It's about helping workplaces become more inclusive, and it's about focus on parity of opportunity. We're not telling you that you all need to go out there and employ more disabled people. What we want is for you to create an inclusive environment, an authentically inclusive environment, and we want to help you do that. And what I've realised is that actually for me in my life, my disability has been my superpower. It's been one of my greatest assets in everything that I've done in my life. That is not the case for the majority of the disabled community. They are constantly faced with barriers, setbacks, hurdles that they're constantly having to fight for and overcome. And so now I feel a responsibility to help them overcome those challenges. And that is why I'm now one of the consultants for TAP. We are constantly trying to help workplaces be the best version of themselves and create a space where people have that sense of belonging. We do it through webinars, through workshops, through environmental audits, recruitment audits, anything that we can do that works for you, that is what we want to achieve. And I think ultimately, by doing that, you're going to create a more successful workplace, whether that's people that you've already got in-house. The amount of disclosures we've had off the back of some of our workshops has been incredible, because actually by being a part of this inclusion training, people have gone, I feel safe that I can disclose my true authentic self. But also creating an authentically inclusive environment will welcome people, because they'll get that feeling that this is somewhere they can be their best selves. And that is ultimately what we want to achieve. We want you guys to help you reach your full potential, but also lead others into that success as well. So I'm just going to finish with what we call our holy grail within TAP, which is the 3 E's. And I've spoken about them a lot within my presentation already. But we have 3 E's of education, exposure, and empathy. As leaders or as people working with other people, you need to educate yourself on the people around you. You need to know about who they are, what they do, what their needs are, what their abilities are. You then need to expose yourself to them. Spend time with them, make yourself relatable, make yourself approachable to them, because they are more likely going to respect you. They want to see you be a bit more vulnerable and open yourselves up to them, because then they'll do the same to you. And then with those 2 key things, you'll then find empathy, and ultimately greater success within your workplace. So that is what our end goal is. I'm incredibly passionate about what I do with TAP, but also I continue on with my broadcasting career and being a mum and trying to figure out how to change a nappy with one hand is my greatest challenge at the moment. But I feel very lucky to be on this journey, and I feel very lucky to have been able to share it with you, because I feel like there's an opportunity for you to get involved with what we do, and hopefully I can answer any questions that you might have. And if not, please come and see us out on our stand. We'd love to get your details and let you know a bit more about what we do and how we can help you. So thank you very much for listening and for staying awake and sticking it out for the drink session afterwards. So thank you very much.